U.S. Vice President JD Vance says nuclear talks with Iran in Geneva showed some progress, but warns Tehran is still refusing to acknowledge President Donald Trump's red lines. Vance said President Trump is demanding solutions through diplomacy or another option as the U.S. military presence continues to build. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
Speaking to Fox News, Vice President JD Vance said the two sides agreed to continue talks after yesterday's second round, but made clear that Iran has yet to accept key American demands, including that it must never obtain a nuclear weapon. Vance said President Trump is seeking a solution through diplomacy or another option, but reserves the right to declare when talks have reached their end.
I think the president has a lot of options. We do have a very powerful military. The president's shown a willingness to use it. He also has a remarkable diplomatic team. He's shown a willingness to use that, too. And so what the president has been very clear with the Iranians, and actually I just talked to Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner this morning about some of their negotiations, is the United States has certain red lines. Our primary interest here is we don't want Iran to get a nuclear weapon. We don't want nuclear proliferation.
A U.S. official said Iran agreed to return with detailed proposals within 2 weeks to try to close remaining gaps. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi described the talks as constructive and said understandings were reached on guiding principles. Meanwhile, open-source flight trackers and U.S. officials confirmed that more than 50 American fighter jets, including F-22s, F-35s, and F-16s, have moved toward the Middle East in the past 24 hours, along with refueling aircraft. The U.S. has reinforced its military presence with the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln, currently in the region, and the USS Gerald R. Ford en route, accompanied by destroyers. For its part, the Iranian Navy temporarily shut down parts of the Straits of Hormuz while conducting live-fire military exercises, including missile launches. The strait, a critical global energy choke point, was closed for several hours as Iranian forces carried out drills in a sign of defiance in the face of U.S. threats. Israeli officials predict that the negotiations are likely doomed, describing Iran's optimism as a possible smokescreen. Jerusalem assesses that Trump and his close advisors may be preparing the ground for a military strike, and that the president wants to show diplomacy was fully exhausted first.
Families across Iran have been defying heavy regime pressure and threats to honor victims of the January protests, as the 40th day memorial marks a powerful symbol of resistance. Across Iran, mourners gathered at gravesites holding memorials for those killed in the crackdown on January 8th and 9th. Despite threats from security forces, cemetery closures, and heavy patrols, families performed traditional rituals, released doves, and even danced in grief. Videos show crowds chanting "Death to Khamenei" and applauding the slain, with internet disruptions reported in several areas. Victims ranged widely in age, including children and teens, highlighting the heavy toll on Iran's youth. Footage surfaced from multiple cities, including Mashhad, showing regime forces raiding and arresting mourners. In the village of Chenar, regime forces violently raided a memorial and arrested a reported 400 Iranians, including children, out of a population of only 4,000. Chenar went viral in the past month for tearing down a statue of the late IRGC terrorist commander Qasem Soleimani, and again for the 40-day memorial yesterday, as they held a large protest and chanted "Death to the dictator." As of now, tens of thousands have been arrested across Iran from the protests, which began in December. And with each day, the regime is sentencing more to death. All the while, the regime itself held a memorial appropriating the deaths of the civilians they massacred and claimed it was the result of Zionist sedition. Analysts say the 40th day memorial has become a potent symbol of public defiance, illustrating the deep wounds left by the regime's crackdown and the continuing determination of Iranians to honor those killed. Well, joining us now to discuss the latest in Iran is Orel Tobelem, the Director of Research at the Forum for Foreign Relations. Orel, thanks as always for being with us today on ILTV. Disturbing scenes from Iran once again as the violence against the Iranian people continues by the regime, as we see the regime itself doubling down on this propaganda narrative, attempting to blame Zionists for the tens of thousands of casualties. How effective is this tactic that we're seeing?
Thank you, Emily. It's a pleasure to be on. Now, as you've noted, there are deeply disturbing scenes that continue to emerge from Iran, where citizens have been killed, tens of thousands of them, across 40 days of brutal crackdowns on protests, which featured about 20 days of an internet blackout. We've seen new accounts from medical staff in the southeastern city of Kerman indicating that between January 8th and January 9th, as many as 36,000 protesters were killed nationwide over just 2 days. State media and senior officials have characterized the protesters themselves as terrorists and the movement as a form of American Zionist sedition. This is a familiar refrain. It's an attempt to recast domestic dissent as foreign subversion. The regime is quite a mastermind when it comes to much of this rhetoric. In parallel, the IRGC has staged counter ceremonies to the ones that you just described, in which chants of death to America and death to Israel are ringing out alongside Quranic recitations and religious eulogies. Now, the overwhelming majority of Iranians, both within the country and across the diaspora, are simply not buying it. That skepticism, however, has not extended to certain online personalities. Now, the British-Pakistani activist Bushra Sheikh, for example, has been touring Tehran, portraying the regime as a haven of religious freedom, but I would say that we should expect nothing less from career imbeciles. The Islamic Republic itself appears to be borrowing a media playbook that has been used and is currently being used by the state of Qatar, which is to deploy digital influencers as instruments of reputational recovery, hoping that reels and tweets can somehow cover up the sound of live ammunition. In the case of Iran, that tactic is only working and only effective to those who are already radicalized. So in answer to your question, it's not really effective.
Well, I want to shift to the U.S. negotiations. We know they're ongoing between the regime and the United States, but we saw Vice President JD Vance state unequivocally that the regime is not prepared to meet President Trump's red lines. Do you expect this to change?
Yes, but the first task is to establish what President Trump's red lines actually are. So by mid-January, it appeared that beyond explicit declarations of war and proxy force expansion across the region, as well as uranium enrichment, a further threshold had been set by President Trump, which was the regime's systematic execution and brutalization of protesters, especially behind closed doors. Now, Tehran has crossed that line, albeit without the spectacle of public hangings that they said they were going to have. However, Washington's subsequent engagement in very choreographed, performative talks with regime officials in Oman suggests that that line may not be as red would be for President Trump. Now, the optics themselves point to mounting pressure from the Gulf states, particularly Qatar, which stand to bear the brunt of any kinetic escalation given Iran's still substantial stockpiles of short-range ballistic missiles. Additionally, even though the regime is still weakened, it still possesses the necessary capabilities to cause serious destruction across the region, as well as the obstruction of vital maritime shipping routes in the Persian Gulf, particularly the Strait of Hormuz. Strategic caution in Doha and Riyadh, which has been underscored, for example, by Khalid bin Salman, the Saudi defense minister, his visits to Washington in late January, followed by his meeting with the Qatari emir a few days later, appears to have actually translated into diplomatic restraint in Washington. Now, JD Vance, of course, has reiterated that preventing Iranian nuclear proliferation is still a priority, but it's difficult to imagine Tehran offering anything beyond the familiar choreography of assurances and elastic commitments that it has made in the past. They are simply going to be retracted once scrutiny fades.
Well, I want to ask you, we see a whole lot of hardware being sent to the Middle East, the largest buildup since the Gulf War for the United States. Do you expect to see some kind of military action in the coming days or weeks against the Islamic Republic?
Well, look, in recent days, there have been reports of a buildup of fighter jets and warships in close proximity to Iran, especially off the coast of Oman. We talked about the USS Abraham Lincoln. It carries roughly 90 aircraft, and that includes F-35 fighter jets, and I think several thousands, I think 5,000 crew members. I suspect that Trump is banking on the credible prospect of American military intervention to coerce Tehran into a deal. I mean, he did tweet, I believe at the beginning of February, that a massive armada is heading to Iran, but the objective is not necessarily war at this stage, but leverage. Trump wants to be able to exhaust all diplomatic channels and keep them even nominally open, so that if war is on the table, it looks justified. I don't think that military action will be likely in the coming days, but perhaps in the coming weeks or months. That will depend on two principal variables. The first is whether the regime continues to maintain its very high degree of intransigence on the nuclear file, and the second is the extent to which it continues to employ lethal force against its own citizens. Those two dynamics will ultimately determine whether deterrence holds or collapses.
All right, well, we'll be following that closely. For now, we do have to end. I want to thank you, Orel Tobelem, for joining us today.
Thank you, Evan.
At U Haifa International, academic excellence isn't just a standard, it's a way of life. With 21 English-taught master's programs, world-class faculty, and Israel's top national score in the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings, students grow in every direction.
If you really want to challenge yourself academically, grow in a very diverse community, and be immersed in such an important and significant environment, University of Haifa is the place for you.
Located on the stunning Carmel Ridge, the U Haifa blends academic excellence with a welcoming community.
U Haifa International has a great combination of top-notch academics with a great community of students.
Whether you're pursuing a one-year master's or diving into research, U Haifa gives you the tools, mentorship, and real-life insight to make your mark on the world. U Haifa International. Master your mind, live your Israel experience.
Well, an IDF soldier has been killed in what the Army describes as a friendly fire incident in southern Gaza overnight. The fallen soldier has been named as Staff Sergeant Ofer Yafeh, 21 years old, a fighter in the Paratrooper Brigade's reconnaissance unit from HaYogev. The IDF says he was fatally hit by gunfire from other Israeli forces during a Khan Yunis demolition operation in the area. The circumstances of the incident are under further investigation. Yafeh is the fifth Israeli service member killed since the ceasefire that took effect on October 10th, and the 925th fallen soldier since Hamas's October 7th attack. Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar will represent Israel at the inaugural Board of Peace meeting in Washington this Thursday, chaired by U.S. President Donald Trump. The board aims to oversee the implementation of the U.S. peace plan for Gaza, but as fighting continues in the Strip and Hamas disarmament is still far away, the stakes remain high. Let's cross now to our correspondent, Alec Pollard. Alec, what can you tell us?
Yes, Emily. So Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar is departing to the United States with two crucial missions. One, to represent Israel in the inaugural meeting of the new Board of Peace for Gaza. And secondly, to attend a UN Security Council session on developments in the Middle East. Sa'ar will join leaders from 28 countries at the board's meeting, chaired by Trump and tasked with overseeing the reconstruction of post-war Gaza and ensuring implementation of the U.S. peace plan. But the body enters a highly contentious environment. Hamas has called on the board to pressure Israel to halt what it claims are ongoing violations of the ceasefire, describing the situation in Gaza as a continuing war of genocide. Israeli officials reject these accusations. Since the start of the ceasefire in October, the IDF says dozens of terror operatives and suspects have been killed for crossing the yellow line, the ceasefire line, and attacking troops, and targeted strikes have continued against Hamas and allied infrastructure. The board's inaugural session will not only focus on funding and reconstruction, but also face questions on accountability, ceasefire enforcement, and regional security. Israel's main goal will be to ensure its security needs. First and foremost, the disarmament of Hamas and removal of its personnel from the post-war civil administration of the Strip. But Israel will face a tough task from Hamas supporters Turkey and Qatar, who will also feature prominently on the board. Thus, this Board of Peace is set to be another arena for diplomatic struggles. And as we know, while Israel wins on the battlefield, the IDF wins on the battlefield, in these diplomacy battles, it is not nearly as successful, although there are hopes that the board under the chairmanship of Trump will be a lot fairer to Israel than the UN, which has been historically extremely hostile. And of course, there is that UN Security Council meeting session, which Sal will be attending as well. Back to you, Emily.
All right, Alec, thank you for that update. The month-long Ramadan began overnight, and Israeli security forces are sending a dual message, publicly wishing a peaceful and blessed holy month to those observing it, while at the same time intensifying operations in Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria to prevent attacks and maintain stability during a highly sensitive period that historically has seen an increase in terror attacks against Israelis. ILTV's Devo Klein has more.
Ramadan began last night in Israel, Judea and Samaria, and Gaza after the new crescent moon was officially sighted across much of the region. Official moon sighting committees in Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Qatar announced that the new moon was seen, marking the start of the Muslim holy month. Palestinian media reported that the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem and the Palestinian territories also confirmed the sighting. In Oman, however, the moon was not spotted, and Ramadan will begin there only tonight. In Jerusalem and across the West Bank, Palestinians decorated streets and shops with colorful lights and ornaments, stocking up on food and sweets ahead of the fast. Near Hebron, a giant illuminated Ramadan crescent was erected to draw visitors and revive local businesses after months of tensions. Ramadan, the 9th and holiest month of the Islamic calendar, is a time of fasting from dawn to dusk, prayer, and community. It will conclude with the festival of Eid al-Fitr at the next new moon. The IDF published a message on social media wishing a peaceful Ramadan to those observing the month. At the same time, the Israel Defense Forces is intensifying nightly operations in Judea and Samaria during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan to prevent attacks and maintain stability during a highly sensitive period. The IDF says arrest raids and troops reinforcements are underway in key flashpoints, with a focus on Nablus in northern Samaria. Forces are working to dismantle terror networks and thwart attacks against Israeli civilians both in the territories and inside Israel. Commanders are stressing the need for a constant security presence, with reservists from the Menashe Brigade still operating around the clock, including in volatile areas near Joseph's tomb. In recent weeks, security forces have arrested suspected militants and incitement figures, while also holding warning talks with former prisoners. In Jerusalem, authorities are finalizing arrangements for access to the Temple Mount, as police prepare for large crowds. Officials say the combination of strong security and a community outreach is aimed at ensuring a calm Ramadan despite regional tensions.
Well, Hezbollah now says it rejects the Lebanese government's plan to disarm the terror group within 4 months, calling it a move serving Israel. Amid the fragile ceasefire, the IDF continues to hit Hezbollah and other threats. The latest operation took out 2 Islamic Jihad operatives crossing from Lebanon into Syria. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
The latest IDF airstrike took place near the village of Majd al-Anjar in the Bekaa Valley, on a road leading from Beirut to Damascus, about 40 kilometers north of Israel. The IDF says the targeted operatives had been working to advance terror activities against Israel from Lebanese territory and posed an immediate threat to citizens and IDF troops in Syria. Lebanese authorities reported 4 people were killed. Meanwhile, in Beirut, Hezbollah officials said the government's 4-month timeline for implementing the second phase of the nationwide disarmament plan was unacceptable. Hezbollah Secretary General Sheikh Naim Qassem described the effort as a mistake that, what he said, serves the goals of Israeli aggression. Shiite ministers walked out of the cabinet meeting in protest. Israel maintains that Hezbollah's weapons outside of state control pose a direct threat to security and say actions like the strike on the Syrian-Lebanese border are part of ongoing efforts to prevent Hezbollah and other terror factions from rebuilding and rearming along the northern border.
Israel is moving closer to deploying its next-generation missile defense system. The head of Israel Aerospace Industries says the new Arrow 4 interceptor will significantly boost the country's ability to shoot down ballistic missiles. ILTV's Kalev Ben David reports.
The president and CEO of Israel Aerospace Industries, Boaz Levy, says the in-development Arrow 4 system will increase Israel's interception success rates and help the country stay ahead of evolving threats. Speaking at a defense technology expo in Tel Aviv, Levy said IAI focuses on future threats, not just current ones. He confirmed that Arrow 4, designed to replace the long-serving Arrow 2, is expected to enter operational deployment in the coming months. The Arrow 4 is the latest generation in Israel's Arrow family, developed with the U.S. Missile Defense Agency. It is designed to intercept ballistic missiles within the atmosphere and to handle advanced threats, including maneuverable and potentially hypersonic missiles that challenge traditional defense systems. Arrow 4 will work alongside the Arrow 3, which has been operational since 2017. The older Arrow 2, first deployed in 1998, is expected to be phased out over time. The Arrow systems have already been used in direct confrontations with Iran, which has fired ballistic missiles at Israel from distances of more than 1,500 kilometers. Arrow 4 will form part of Israel's broader multi-tier air defense network, which also includes Iron Dome for short-range rockets and David's Sling for medium-range threats. With flight tests already underway and international interest growing, including from Germany, defense officials say Arrow 4 represents a major upgrade in Israel's ability to detect, track, and destroy the most advanced missile threats on the horizon.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is set to visit Israel this Sunday, according to the Prime Minister's office. The high-profile trip highlights the growing ties between Jerusalem and New Delhi. Modi will be in Israel for 2 days, February 25th and 26th, his first official visit since 2017. He's expected to meet Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other leaders to discuss expanding bilateral cooperation in defense, technology, trade, and regional security. During his visit, Modi is anticipated to address the Knesset, a symbolic step underlining the strategic relationship between the two democracies. This follows several high-level exchanges over the past year and is seen as part of a broader push to deepen partnership amid global and regional challenges. In India, the announcement generated debate, with some political figures criticizing the government for not sharing details directly before the foreign announcement. Modi's previous visit to Israel in July 2017 was historic, marking a new era of diplomatic and strategic cooperation between the two nations. Turning to financial news, where Israeli shipping giant Zim has been sold to Germany's Hapag-Lloyd in a deal valued at $4.2 billion. The agreement was signed in Tel Aviv with a German delegation led by Hapag-Lloyd CEO Rolf Haben Jensen, traveling to Israel to finalize the transaction. The company is expected to outline its strategic plans in a joint news conference with Israeli and German media. Under the terms of the deal, Hapag-Lloyd will sell Zim's Israeli operations to the FIMI private equity fund, a move aimed at preserving a strong and independent Israeli shipping presence. FIMI CEO Ishai Davidi said the fund recognizes the strategic importance of maintaining an Israeli shipping company and plans to establish a new Zim with a modern, efficient fleet and broad logistics capabilities. The sale marks one of the largest transactions in Israel's maritime sector and has drawn attention over the transfer of a strategic national company to foreign ownership, even as officials stress that Israeli operations will remain strong and financially resilient. And let's take a look now at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 11 degrees Celsius or 53 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see sunny skies alongside steady temperatures, seeing highs of 16 degrees Celsius or 62 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all of your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels and keep up with us on social media. That's ILTV_Israel on all platforms. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be well, and thank you for watching.